This episode is brought to you by Adobe Firefly, the all-in-one creative studio with AI-powered image and video generation. Built for today's creative process, Firefly helps you generate, edit, and experiment fast. Because the asks aren't getting smaller, and the timelines? Still tight. With all the best creative AI models in one place, Firefly brings your ideas to life. Learn more at adobe.com/firefly.
I wrote a little song to remind you, Choice Hotels get you more of the experiences you value. The Cambria Hotel's got it all. A rooftop bar, have a ball. Cocktails up here feel just right. Is Cambria amazing? All right. Bring a date, your team, or even your mom. Book direct at choicehotels.com. See you on the roof.
Guys, welcome to the Bare Brain Podcast. And today, if you are going to watch this, if you want to hang out with me as I do a little bit of sketching, just moving the mind a little bit differently than what I usually do. For a lot of reasons. I think, first of all, the podcast turns 8 next week. So it's having its 8th birthday, and I have some pretty cool things lined up to celebrate. But more than anything, as we grow, there's so much that we experience. And I think if you are in the space of growing versus just getting older, you start to realize a lot more about yourself in the coolest way possible, right? Not everything needs to be pretty, but I think things can really be interesting. So if you want to do something different with me today, you might hear a little sketching in my microphone, but also this is a book I've been reading too, The Highly Sensitive Person, Influencer Style. It's a really cool book because it does put certain things into perspective that I realize about myself. Being a pretty sensitive human. And I think sensitivity in itself has definitely, it gets a bad rep. I think the reason why is because we think of sensitivity as like this weakness versus it being like an alarm system. What does it mean to actually be sensitive? I was talking to a client the other day about the whole concept of sensitivity. I was like, you have a sensitive password on your bank account, right? And he's like, yeah. I was like, okay. So obviously sensitivity is not weakness. It's more about creating barriers or just acknowledgement or recognition of things that we are impacted by. And I think, that's really important to just understand in life, especially as you get older, because I think it's very easy to go through life kind of blind and maybe even oblivious to some degree. I don't know what I'm drawing, by the way. I just, sometimes I just let my pencil just kind of move and see what comes out of it. Sometimes we get something dope. Other times we just get art. You know what I'm saying? But sensitivity is a very funny thing because it really does give us information in terms of our identity. And, something that I talked about recently was like this security blanket around our interpersonal relationships. How, I think we reach for relationships when we are in need of comfort, but we are not necessarily creating safety in those connections the way we should be. And a big issue is that I've realized, people kind of, it's a phrasing I like to use when you bank on somebody else's forgiveness, right? You create a tab. It's like an emotional tab you create with other people where it's like, you never invest fully. You never fully pay up, right? You're like, hey, put this on my tab. I'll get to it later. IOUs. And when we do that enough with people, we are showing people in no uncertain terms that they are not worth investing in the moment. And we might get back to them, we might not. but we kind of expect them to carry the emotional labor of the relationship. And what we need to understand, if we continually do that, we're saying to somebody I always expect you to be there. You're not going anywhere, right? And I think there's a difference between having safe people in our lives, right, and appreciating the safety that they create, versus having safe people and showing them that they are not safe with us because either we never seem to have the time for them, we don't make the time for them, and when they are impacted by some level of negligence or carelessness, we still expect them to do the emotional work of taking care of our feelings, right? Protecting us from our consequences, and really just kind of taking on the load of what that is. And, you know, throughout my life, I've seen it, I've heard it, I've experienced it. I've done my best to not do it to other people because, again, one of the things we hear all the time is how short life is, right? Life is short. And life isn't just short in terms of, you know, mortality. Life is also short in the ways of, like, we never know when we are reaching expiration in our relationship with other people, right? We don't know that. We don't know that. And we are definitely creatures of comfort, which means that a lot of times we will continually procrastinate on being present and being purposeful with other people until finally we're shocked that that person stops showing up, right? And the reason why we are surprised is because, well, up until this point, things have been fine for me. You know, things have been fine for me. And now that you are having a negative response to my negative behavior, I now have an issue. I now have a problem. And not only that, I am expecting you to remedy this situation. Okay? And sometimes we have to understand, if we are on the receiving end of people who don't always, you know, show up in the best ways possible, we have to constantly ask ourselves, what am I teaching this person? What have I taught this person I'm okay with? You know, because I think a lot of times the people who say that they are so great communicators are probably not, you know, are probably very passive in their approach in terms of what they're communicating. And we kind of expect people to just figure it out. You know, my brother was on me about this recently in terms of, like, being a little bit more clear, you know? And sometimes, yes, it can be frustrating to continually feel like you're repeating yourself or beating a dead horse, but it's only because you continue to not say the thing in definites, right? To not say what you actually feel. Either you're trying to soften it or you're trying to do it in the path of least resistance. And that in itself kind of creates, it creates this very interesting dynamic with other people where, yeah, sometimes people weaponize incompetence, yes, but other times people are not hearing you because you are not really clear on what it is that you want to say. The truth of the matter is everybody wants to be taken care of, right? That's a truth. Everybody you meet wants to be taken care of. And I think when we can understand that, it does a couple of things. For one, it allows us to recognize that sometimes what you're asking for and what you're seeking is not this anomaly, right? It's not an anomaly. And a lot of times we refrain from asking for what we need because we're scared that we're going to be rejected or we're going to be punished, or we're going to be seen as needy or clingy and all these other things. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of your relationships will last primarily because you continue to exist in the imbalance, right? That's the reason why a lot of your connections are what they are, because of your participation. You know, I think that's something we often don't think about in terms of how relationships last so long, or how affected we are, or why, or what it is that we're actually affected by, you know? And then there are people, yes, who treat relationships like a security blanket. There's another component I was thinking about recently where, sometimes we try to have these different definitions for friendship, and I think it's primarily because we are not looking to be disciplined in friendship. So we keep trying to find ways to have second place trophies when it comes to our relationships, right? And what I mean by that is, if we continue to move the goalposts on what a friendship actually is and what it should look like and what it should be, not only does it create confusion, but it kind of allows the barrier of entry to be very low, which means that there's more disappointment that will potentially show up. Why? Because everybody's getting let in, right? Everybody's getting let in, even if they're not qualified. And when that happens, what happens? They're in the crowd, right? They're in the mix. And we can't really distinguish one from the other. Aristotle talked about 3 levels of friendship. The friendship of utility, friendship of pleasure, friendship of utility, and friendship of virtue. Now, the funny thing is there are some people who utilize relationships, but they call it friendship. And what it is I am going to use you as a tool. It could be my emotional blanket. It can be, the person that I go to when I'm in trouble, the person that has clout, the person that has access, money, whatever. I will use this relationship to my advantage until I don't need it. And some people start relationships off that way. And depending on who you are in your own value system, you may recognize it much sooner than another person wants you to, or much sooner than a person even fully acknowledges what they're doing, right? Because to some degree, people know what they're doing. They know how they are operating. They know what they are looking to receive. But see, the way it is we have allowed friendship to be such this lazy practice that we don't always see an issue with how we're treating others. Right? So we think that, oh yeah, well, you're my friend, so you should be there no matter what. Or that's what friends do, or networking, right? And in reality, we haven't built a trust system that allows us to recognize that even, hey, if I disappear for the day, that I will return to this relationship, right? Or at least I will insert a buffer. Right? I won't let too much time pass without me communicating what's actually taking place and what's going on. One of the things I said is a lot of people have walked into friendship backwards, right? Where they want all the benefits of a deep, solid, long-standing relationship that's not just based on history, but also health, without actually nourishing the relationship in the ways that it needs to be for that to take place. Okay? So now there's a disruption where we expect people in our lives to kind of endure the blow of negligence. And when they don't, we're frustrated because it's well, we should be able to do this. Right, but that can only be done if we have put in practice, we put in time, we put in work. It takes hours, a lot of hours to actually be somebody's friend, And I think we're so afraid of labeling people as acquaintances, right? That has become offensive. But think about it. What's more offensive? Calling somebody an acquaintance and keeping them in that position in life and, not being hurt, versus labeling somebody as a friend and then later realizing that they were never that. And now you have to recover. And now your trust issues around what friendship looks like are amplified, right? Now you have a new blind spot that you have to take care of. Now you were so hesitant to even step into friendship because of someone who was probably better as an associate or an acquaintance has taken a very special spot in your life. Friendships, when you're in friendship with other people, you guys are influencing each other. Friendship is a very intimate relationship, right? There's intimacy there. It's not passive. And yeah, a lot of people are very passive about those connections, but when you really look at what they're doing and what they're saying, it's not friendship, right? It's not friendship. It's networking. It's convenience, It's everything but actual friendship and participation. And I think it's okay to recognize that. I think it's necessary to recognize it in yourself, but I also think it's important to recognize it in other people, right? We don't have to settle into connections. We don't have to be friends with people who want friendship from us and are not looking to provide, right? You don't have to give someone your friendship. That's not how it works. Okay? And I think the sooner you learn that, the sooner you stop being afraid of what healthy relationships could actually look like, but also you recognize the honesty of what you're willing to participate in. This is like a little eraser. It's not like, what is it? It's sticky. So I keep it kind of wrapped up. Yeah, just so it doesn't dry out. I love these erasers. So for me, funny enough, a little side note, I think drawing was one of my first mediums in terms of art. As a kid, I used to draw constantly. Yeah, people used to gift me sketchbooks all the time, like my friends, my family. Everybody knew, hey, get Isaiah in a sketchbook, get him some pencils, and he's a simple, happy man. You know, and as time went on, I started to treat drawing more like a chore because I wasn't tending to it enough, and I felt guilty. Funny enough, a lot of times people will avoid you when they recognize they haven't been tending to the relationship, and there may be a level of guilt that they feel. That's also a thing too, you know. When it comes to...
This episode is brought to you by Perfect Bistro Cat Food. Hey guys, today I'm interviewing my cat about his perfect bistro food. Percy, you seem to be a big Perfect Bistro fan. Care to comment? Totally. What do you like about it? You love the high-quality ingredients? And the delicious flavors, of course. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Listen to Percy, guys. Visit perfectbistro.com to try it for your cat.
When it comes to our connections, there's a lot of evidence in terms of how we take care of them. There's a lot of evidence in terms of what we feel entitled to versus what we feel obligated to show up with. And truth be told, relationships are always a choice, even with family, right? You can determine what level of relationship you want to have with somebody. Being related to a person is not the same thing as being in a relationship with them. Those two things don't coexist, and they don't always need to. Because to be in a relationship with somebody means that we're doing life together, right? It means that there's some active participation. It means that there is impact and there is influence, you know? And we don't continually have to be impacted by people who will potentially influence how we cultivate relationships moving forward, right? How we take care of ourselves, what we think of ourselves in other relationships. We got to understand, this is why I say, you know, friendship is not a passive thing, because these people will most certainly impact you just like you will impact others. And yeah, there are a lot of people who think that friendships are just placeholders, who believe that friendships should just, you know, bear the negligence and still be there later. But we got to understand, people are people. They're not placeholders, you know, they're not props for our lives. And if you or someone else thinks that a person is just a fan, right? Somebody that they reach for when they need validation or accolades or insert, then, hey, maybe you should reconsider. And also, too, other people will reconsider. All right? We prepay disappointment sometimes, in the sense of, you know, we tell people off the bat, yeah, you know, I'm a bad texter, I'm a bad this, I'm a bad that. And then somebody responds in kind and says, okay, being that I recognize these are the things that you do, I'm going to reevaluate this relationship. And or sometimes we tell people in advance who we are. So after we get what we want from them, we fall back into our patterns. And then when they're concerned, it's like, well, I told you I was a bad texter, or none of my other relationships expect much from me, so why do you? You know? There are so many ways to participate in relationships. But it's very telling when you are looking to be intentional and you are telling other people how much intention you have when it comes to them, or how much attention you actually want from them. So it's just something to think about, you know. If you want safety in your connections, ask yourself, how safe of a person am I? And being a safe person is not a people pleaser. There's not always somebody who's listening and willing to give their ear. There's more to that. It's saying how you actually feel, right? It's not building resentment. It's asking for what you need. It's being truthful. It's also reevaluating relationships when necessary. It's all those things, okay? So just something to think about. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves. Please take care of your people and take flight. I'll show you this real quick. It's nothing extraordinary, but I was just sketching a door, a little shadow, right? Using this as a reference, right? Sometimes you gotta open that door, or sometimes you gotta close it and be okay with it. But don't stand in the doorway. You're blocking a draft. Take flight, y'all.